Welcome to this Cambridge Marketing College webinar. This is Neil Wilkins talking to you today. We're going to cover the topic of responsible marketing as a commercial advantage. So this is a topic that isn't just a nice to do or a have to do. It actually can bring business value as well. There's quite a bit of evidence and research that has gone into this topic, and we're going to uncover some of the things that you can do as a responsible marketer and as a responsible business to use that kind of position to beat your competition, to get more customers, to develop the trust that you need to do good marketing and business in 2026. So, this is going to explore how ethical, transparent, and socially responsible marketing will strengthen the relationships you have with your stakeholders, your customers, those suppliers and those businesses who you work with. So this will be about building trust, loyalty, and at the same time, there's a sustainability thing in here. This is about developing and fostering long-term performance. And this really does matter right now. Responsible marketing is no longer a nice to have. It's not one of those kind of, oh, well, we could decide to do it next month, or we might think about adding that to our plans. This is helping brands earn permission to be chosen, believed, and recommended. So if you're in, particularly if you're in a very kind of commoditized marketplace where a lot of the competition look and sound and behave in the same kind of way, a responsible marketing position is a commercial advantage. This will take you beyond the crowd. This will cut through the noise, and this is going to enable you to really deliver the expectations that your customers have. They want you to be ethical. They want you to be transparent. They want to build a really strong relationship with you. And responsible marketing is a key way of doing that. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover a number of key elements that build this whole responsible marketing position. So by the end of this talk, hopefully, fingers crossed, you should be able to understand responsible marketing as a source of commercial value. So hopefully getting that value through loud and clear. We're going to connect trust, transparency, and ethics to this idea of building loyalty and improving performance from your customer's perspective. It's all very well saying, yeah, we're a responsible business, and yes, our customers love us and trust us. That's kind of okay, but it's far, far better if your customers actually reflect that and tell you that themselves. So we're going to go deep into how you can do that. We're going to also focus on using proven models to guide responsible decisions. So there are some models and some theories to enable you to put this stuff into practice, because otherwise it just kind of sits there as a, yeah, that makes sense, but what do I do? We don't want that. We want you to actually be able to take action. And also to enable you to recognize the risks of weak claims and poor practice. Again, this is going to be hopefully a continuous improvement exercise. So we have to know kind of what's not working to be able to fix it and make this thing work. So it's kind of a balance that we're going to strike. And we're going to apply some practical ideas to the things that we do in everyday life as marketers, the campaigns, the content, and obviously always fostering the improvements in our customer journey as we build those relationships. So, what do we actually mean? What do I actually mean as well by responsible marketing? Because it's very easy to kind of just say it, isn't it? And it's very easy to sort of think, well, obviously I'm a responsible marketer because I'm a good person. And this is, of course, at its core about doing good business, about being a good marketer. Somebody used the word with me a few years back, and they said, well, it's about being wholesome, isn't it? And I thought, do you know, that is actually the word. It's about being a wholesome marketer. And actually, when you think about that word wholesome, it's about wholesome. So actually dealing with the whole, in other words, across everything you do, as well as being wholesome, the kind of just textbook definition of the word. So, responsible marketing is marketing that creates value, of course, because that's what we're always trying to do, whilst acting fairly, transparently, and with regard to customers, society, and the environment. So, there's a little bit here about sustainability, there's a lot here about stakeholder engagement, and there's a lot here about doing good by your customer. So, in practice, this means that what you need to be doing consistently is making truthful claims, using data fairly, having intimate respect for your customers, inclusion and accessibility at all times, wherever you possibly can, social and environmental accountability. And that word accountability is important because it means you've got to be gathering evidence of what you're doing, not just pretending you're doing it. And long-term relationship thinking. And that's going to be a tricky one for a lot of us because we are in the current climate, we are really, really pushed and pressured to delivering in the short term. And that often can be flying in the face of actually building long-term relationships and value. Because a lot of the time we're pressured into, can you just deliver this month's numbers? And can you support sales like this? And we need to get this thing out of the door. And we've got this product launch we need to sell rather than actually thinking, okay, these things maybe support a long-term responsible marketing position. So it's not easy, and there are a lot of elements to it, hence the word wholesome, but it isn't anti-commercial. A lot of this stuff is really about balancing the idea of getting commercial value and getting return on investment from all of these activities. So it isn't just that marketing sits over there doing this lovely, lovely kind of stuff that we call responsible marketing, and the business is over on the other side. This is actually blending everything together. So that's the mindset I'd like you to think about is how can you do this stuff in a way that actually serves the business and the customer? That's where we're going to go with this. The first kind of useful theory, just to help us kind of take this perspective of, and it's thinking broadly across everything we do, is the triple bottom line. Now, you've probably come across this one. It's a very well-known theory, or it's a kind of a framing device, as it's often called. It's people, planet, and profit. It doesn't give you the answers, but what it does, it means it's about balancing commercial performance with social and environmental consequences. So a responsible marketer, for example, would not just be selling boxes of products to enable others to consume without thinking about how were those products and services created? Were they created ethically and mindfully and sustainably? What is the impact of our packaging and our delivery process of getting that product or service out into the customer or out to the market? And then actually, how is that product used in the marketplace? What impact on the environment will that have? What is the planetary kind of impact of the stuff that we do? And so there's this inherent balance that we've always got available to us. So the question, I guess, is does your current marketing process, in whatever role you have, does it consider all three? Or are you pushed consistently in one or two of the directions, but you don't necessarily get the opportunity to think about all three? Because responsible marketing and responsible business that is seeking commercial advantage balances all three. Okay, so there, I've kind of given you, it's a bit of a spoiler there, for spoiler alert for what's coming. This is the answer. It is about balancing all of those elements together. And it's not about just being really excellent, world class in one area. In other words, we're probably selling better than the competition. We're a really commercially successful business. And we don't worry about people and planet because we're just making money. Or it could be it's all about the planet and we're taking our eye off of the ball of actually being commercial and we're just being great to the planet. Well, you probably won't be in business this time next month if you do that. So this balance is absolutely key. And at the heart of all of this is this word trust. Now, trust has to happen internally as well as externally. You know, you're not going to get this responsible marketing story into the business and be really understood unless you have the trust of the people you're talking to. And I'm talking about other departments, other teams, other colleagues, as well as upwards in terms of management. And trust reduces friction. It makes the claims, and particularly if you're making claims internally as well as externally to your audiences in the public domain, it makes the claims easier to believe. If people trust you, it makes it your prices easier to justify. It makes the relationships easier to retain. Trust is everything. So if there's kind of one word you're making a note of here to deliver this kind of responsible marketing approach and to be attending to that triple bottom line balance, it's trust. Always trust should be treated as a really strategic asset, not a vague brand value like, oh, yes, our customers trust us. Well, can you prove it? Well, no, but that's what we believe they do. That's not strong enough anymore. Maybe back in the day we could get away with it, but right here, right now, it can't be a vague kind of claim. It has to be a really strategic asset that we work towards if we don't feel we've actually achieved it yet. And that's also fine. All of us, I know a lot about this stuff. And am I perfect in this? Absolutely not. I'm on the journey much as you are. So we can all improve in every element that we're talking about here. And alongside trust, there's also transparency and a lot of consumer skepticism. There really are. Consumers out there, and if you're in B2B, and obviously a lot of you will be, just treat the word consumer as the consumer of your offer, of your marketing. So they will be business people, but just generally, everyone is increasingly alert to weak or exaggerated claims. There's a lot of research out there that show that consumers, and in great numbers, are skeptical about the authenticity of sustainability claims, for example. Well, many are frustrated about how hard it is to separate genuine action from maybe greenwashing marketing claims that are going on. So that just that as an example just goes to show that, if claims are vague, your trust will fall, or the customer's trust in you will fall. But if proof is clear and evidence is there at hand with every claim, everything that you do, everything that you say, it's backed up with solid evidence. In other words, you've spent a little bit of time before you say something to get your ducks in a row, to align everything that you need to be able to then substantiate that claim. And of course, it just gives confidence, doesn't it? If you just think about it, claims that, you've heard, if it's backed up with something really solid and tangible, you're probably going to believe that claim. Where if it's just a huge marketing message that's shouted from the rooftops with little substantiation and no kind of foundation of real truth, you're not going to trust it. Well, your customers are no different to you. They will feel the same. So it's really important to remember that. And there is a commercial logic really behind all of this, isn't there? When you stop and kind of think about this, is that responsible marketing really can support commercial performance because it can. I mean, you just think about it. If you've got greater trust, if you've got stronger loyalty, if your brand is better differentiated using those things and other stuff, if you've got a lower reputational risk because you're backing stuff up with evidence, if you've got a higher quality of customer relationships because you're truly actively listening and acting on what your customers are feeding back to you, and if you're more resilient in long-term growth, you're going to have a commercially sustainable and viable business. This is not rocket science. I often find myself saying this when I talk around this subject, is that there's nothing kind of new here. And when you stop and think about it, it is absolutely sensible. It's really, really obvious. So why do so few marketers and why do so few businesses really give this the valid kind of amount of time in the management meetings, in the day-to-day activities? Because from certainly my experience, and maybe you'll share this view in your own experience here with your own organization, is that we don't spend enough time thinking about this stuff collectively, holistically. We pay lip service to it, but we could do an awful lot more. And that's the really important part that we're trying to uncover here is kind of it's important to do, obviously, but there's this link between doing stuff in a really responsible, action-orientated way and then actually seeing the value at the end. Because if you were to tick all six of those boxes and say, we've done all of that, can you imagine the value that your customers would see in the marketing offer that you have through your messaging, through your products and services, through the engagement that your business has with them? Well, you would only be able to say yes, because the logic here is that this is the right way of doing business. This is the way that your customers want you to do business. And something that comes into play here is this kind of broader stakeholder piece as well, because responsible marketing works best when it's designed around multiple stakeholders, not just these short-term sales targets that I've been talking about. So when we talk about stakeholders, yes, I've talked already a lot about customers, but it is your employees, it is the communities around your organization, it is investors, it's partners and suppliers. So it's your agencies, your suppliers, it can be your distributors, it can be your resellers, it can be your regulators if you're in a regulated industry. They are all ready, I guess you could say, for your responsible marketing response. They're ready and waiting. And this is just all good news. Commercial success becomes really durable. It becomes a sustainable habit within your business when marketing decisions are evaluated through the lens of all of these stakeholders. In other words, you sit in their shoes or you look at yourself through their glasses and you say, how do we actually come across right now to our investors? How are we coming across right now to our suppliers? Maybe our design agency, our PR agency, our web agency, for example. How do we look and come across? Do they understand all these responsible practices and initiatives that we're doing? And if they do, well, surely already then we should be seeing a lot of trust, a lot of loyalty. They'll want to work with us. And if we're not doing this stuff, is it any wonder that some of the campaigns fall short? Is it any wonder we're not getting best attention from them or best value from their efforts? This stuff really, really works. So, a reflection question, I guess you could say, would be, well, which stakeholders most often overlooked in that list in your organization's marketing? Because if we're doing this holistic, wholesome marketing, then we should be thinking about everyone, every stakeholder who we impact with the marketing that we do. And if you're missing one, well, maybe that's a good starting point because maybe that's where you're going to get the best gain in the shortest possible time because you start to talk to them in a responsible way. We're going to look at how you do that in a short while. And this is really about kind of thinking about that medium to longer term view as well as short term. I'm not saying we switch off short term attention. You've got to do tactical stuff. We've got to be in business tomorrow. So that's also important. But this is about looking at the medium to longer term view. Responsible marketing and loyalty is built through convenience. It's built through price, but it's also built through the confidence of how the brand itself behaves. So, you can do good marketing, you can give a great price, but if you don't back that up with the brand's actual behavior, the actionable stuff that the customer or the other stakeholders will see about actually what you deliver, you're missing a trick. So people stay longer with brands they feel safe choosing. And that safety comes from a balance of clarity, transparency, affordability, the trusting position, almost the willingness of your brand and your team to really engage with your customer in a relationship. So this moves away from just transactional marketing where, okay, you give me some money, I'm going to sell to you. You can have our product or service, and then we're going to go off and try and do the same with another customer. This is all about saying, we want to get into a relationship with you because we think what we offer is going to give you value. And we think what you're going to give us is the value back, probably in terms of monetary, financial value, but there might be other things. The value that could come back from a segment or group of customers could be the fact they give you feedback on how that product or service works. It could be that you build this loyalty and this trust through treating them as a VIP, through giving them a special extra kind of level of service that all the other customers don't get, and certainly that your competition isn't offering. So multiple ways of really entering into this dialogue, this conversation, this interaction with customers at a much deeper kind of level. And we see this play out already. This is not me making this stuff up and saying, wouldn't it be lovely if? There are many, many case studies that you can see. I mean, a really useful example of a responsible marketing organization is Patagonia. I mean, often used because of the crazy level of stuff that they do, which is focused on people, planet, and profit. They make their profit through focus on people and planet, obviously, particularly planet. And a lot of the examples that they bring through really show brand distinctiveness. I mean, they stand out. If you look from a marketing perspective at Patagonia versus every other organization or brand in their sector, they stand out. As a business commercially, they are massively successful trading on responsible marketing. That's what they trade in. Yes, they have product. Yes, you can buy Patagonia product, but they trade before you even get to that bit. They trade on their reputation as the most socially and environmentally responsible business in their sector. And this ripples out across their whole supply chain, across every employee, across everybody they encounter. And they make a very attractive proposition, both to investors, but also financially. So commercial success coming from really focusing in, really doubling down, tripling down, even if that is such a thing, on responsible marketing. Unilever as well have taken great strides in recent years to kind of really learn some commercial lessons from their past to really start to grow faster than the rest of the organizations in their sectors. And of course, they operate across a whole range of different industries and sectors. But what they focus on and what they prioritize and what they really, really double down in is innovation, resilience, and business value that comes through working with stakeholders and connecting those stakeholders to product, to operations and governance. So they do this all the way through every single process and system they have, not just in the marketing communications that goes out the door. So there's the evidence that they can provide. And if you were to question them or kind of challenge them on any of the claims that they make, they will have a raft of evidence going back deep into the organization through many different levels that proves that actually those claims are valid. So there's no greenwashing in those two examples. And if you can find it, I'd love to see it because I've never actually seen it. And this really, really comes back to this point of responsible claims need evidence. So if in your role you're ever tasked with, can you put this out in our marketing channels? Can you give this thing to the customer? And you look at it and you think, okay, it's a good message, but I'm not really feeling we've got the kind of the groundwork behind it to be able to substantiate this. There is a green claims code which can make very, very clear the things that you have to be ticking the boxes for in every claim that you make. It isn't just about green claims, but it's a very good checklist for building this foundation of evidence. The guidance now talks also as well, the more recent kind of update on the Green Claims Code about further supply chain clarity around responsibility for claims. So basically, if anybody further downstream or further upstream is talking or marketing or sharing what you do on your behalf, so you might have I don't know, retailer, or you might have a distributor or an agent who's talking about because they promote your products, it also applies to them as well. So this is all about due diligence, about keeping on the right side of customer trust and regulation at the same time. So the old world model is long and since gone. It really is. And what we're doing here is by doing all of this stuff, we're building brand trust at the same time as reducing risk. Because, as we said right at the outset, everybody's becoming more skeptical. Nobody knows who to trust, what to trust, where to look. And just look at your social media feeds. You can't even spot what's AI and what's not. You can't even spot whether a brand there that has this lovely product for sale that you quite like the look of is actually a verifiable and, sort of verified business. You don't know. So there's a lot of risk out there as a customer. And what they'll do is they'll often use trust to simplify decisions as to whether or not they're going to go with you or not, or go with a competitor or go with an unknown entity. They're kind of using trust, as you and I would too, to make these fundamental commercial decisions. And we see this thing as especially important in categories like financial services, healthcare, education, food and well-being, technology, and AI-enabled services that I mentioned before. Trust in the brand is absolutely key. Responsible marketing will lower perceived risk and will support choice as all this uncertainty unfolds around your customer. If you become the trusted entity, as every time they see you, they think, at least I'm safe there. It reduces their risk, but also builds the confidence that you are the go-to, which again builds that brand reputation and creates what we call a reputation flywheel. So responsible behavior like this can create this positive flywheel. And as the name suggests, it's just this ongoing spinning thing. Responsible actions, credible communication, this higher trust we're talking about, stronger loyalty and advocacy obviously comes from that. Better commercial resilience is your throughput. That's what you want because people will come back to you because they trust. This is really, really obvious, but it doesn't make sense to so many businesses. And what it does is because you've got commercial resilience, it gives you more freedom to invest in further responsible action. This becomes irresistible. This becomes almost addictive as a set of habits. Once you and the rest of your colleagues and your management team start to see this stuff working, this whole responsible marketing ethos, it will work commercially, and that will be a surefire sign that you are going to get more budget to do more of it because it's going to make sense to the business from an ROI perspective too. So, a little reflection here. Where's your brand strongest in this cycle and where's its weakest? Are there certain things in this flywheel of brand reputation where you sort of think, actually, we were pretty good at that bit? So you can maybe scale that now. And where are you weakest? Where do you need to pay more attention? Because maybe that's where you then start to, okay, we've got some improvement activity to do, and that's going to be important. So it enables you to start building these kind of pictures of how we're going to move this thing forward. And it enables you to avoid what we might term irresponsible marketing. And that's kind of weak practice that often includes things like exaggerated claims, selective evidence, but not in everything that we do. I mean, performative purpose statements, confusing sustainability language. That's an easy one to do. You can really baffle people with claims and ideas and acronyms. Poor, irresponsible marketing, though. Poor data ethics and tokenistic inclusion. So the risks are clear here. If you do any of those things, if you see that stuff playing out in your marketing or in the way that your brand does business, it will see loss of trust. You won't get the loyalty we're talking about. You might even get scrutiny from your regulators. There will be internal cynicism. People won't buy into it internally. So if they don't trust it, your customer's not going to trust it. And this brand damage can be very expensive to repair. And one of the reasons behind that is because one of your competitors could be taking this stuff seriously. So just because you're doing it doesn't mean nobody else is. But if you really invest your time and energy and resources in this, you will move ahead. Because I see very few examples where people are properly doing this seriously. So there's a big upside, but there's also a risk of just ignoring it. So, where we're going to see this in everyday practice, this concept of responsible marketing, well, is visible in how your products are described, data is collected, pricing is framed, inclusive creative choices are, accessible contents and journeys are, honestly, limitations are acknowledged, and also how complaints and questions are handled. So this is really quite interesting. It kind of comes across everywhere. It's not just one campaign. You don't do a responsible marketing campaign and say, hey, tick in the box, we did that. Yeah, all those things that Neil was telling us about, we've just done them. No, this is a pattern of choices. It's about building a habit and saying, okay, if we're going to commit to working in line with this triple bottom line thing, we're going to be ticking the boxes every time we do a campaign, every time we build a project, every time we do a social media post, down to that level of detail. We're going to make sure that we're following this little checklist, that we are always really open and aware of where the risks are, but where the upside is. And it is about that trust and loyalty. And you can see, irrespective of, which sector you're in, you can see a whole host of different examples. You've only got to kind of do a quick little search on responsible marketing case studies and good examples, and you'll see them in retail, in education, healthcare and well-being. And so where would greater transparency for you? Because transparency is one of those things that most businesses say, oh, we can't share that. That's something we've got to keep internally. That's commercially sensitive. And actually, a lot of those things actually aren't. They don't really matter. Probably the competition already know that that's what you're doing because word does get around. Probably your customers already assume that these things are happening. But if you can be more transparent, I'm not talking about giving away really commercially sensitive stuff, but there will be stuff that's on the periphery, the things that you could just talk about, the things that you could share with that evidence. And would that be a game changer? Which areas here might make the best value to you? And so there are some practical tips to kind of moving this forward. I mean, the first one really is start with evidence. So if there's one takeaway from all of this is you've got to build the evidence before you put out the message. And again, irrespective of your role, you might be more internally comms focused, or you could be a content creator, could be a senior marketing manager, whatever your role is, it is about evidence-based because whatever audience you have, they want to know that every claim you make is being backed up. So that is the core message behind responsible marketing. Saying also only what you can support. So not making big bold claims that actually put you in a rather awkward position and then kind of like, oh, we'll say yes and then we'll try and figure it out. It's better to figure it out in advance because that's really key. Avoiding vague virtue language, not just saying things because you're meant to say them in a certain way, but actually saying them because you believe it. If you feel passionate about something, be passionate about it. If you want to sort of talk about something in a slightly more sort of restricted way, then be very clear about that. Don't push your marketing claims too far. Make them real so you can actually deliver, and don't do it just because you feel you should. Work closely with legal compliance or sustainability colleagues. If you don't have those, if you already have them, you've got processes already in place to checklist against these things. But if you don't, use AI. Do deep dives with AI to say, look, I'm putting this particular piece of work out there. Tell me the risks. I'm a responsible marketer. Tell me what risks I should be kind of trying to avoid. Tell me the things that I could do to improve this from a triple bottom line perspective or to be more ethical or to be more transparent. Where are the gaps? So, you can create AI little teams around you to support you with this if you don't know the answers, but it's vital you do this. Another thing you can do as well is measure trust, complaints, retention, and sentiment, as well as short-term response. A lot of the KPIs that we typically have are things like reach, engagement, click-throughs, all that kind of stuff. But what about trust? What about complaints? What about the retention rates? What about those outcomes of how people are actually feeling as a result of doing what they've done? That sentiment, the feeling, is it positive, neutral, or negative? Doesn't matter what the answer is, because whatever the answer is, you can do something about it. Sustain the positive, improve the negative. There's always something we can do and build on. But going deeper than the vanity metrics is key. And also reviewing whether internal behavior matches external messaging. Because if you say stuff and if you put stuff out there that creates a picture for your audience that, hey, look at us, this is what we are and what we stand for. But actually, it's very, very loose and woolly kind of internally, and we can't really back it up or behave like that, then you've pushed it too far. So there's a real practicality that comes in with this. It isn't just about saying and providing the evidence. It's about actually feeling it. It's about actually living it and embodying it, really. And designing for long-term relationship value, not just campaign spikes because you're commercially sensitive to a particular season or a particular, the opportunity that comes in the sectors that you serve. This is also about doing that, but also about thinking, how is this impacting on our long-term relationship value? Because it should in a positive way. And the measurement, I've talked about providing evidence and building this over time. So the measurement is really, really important here. So as a kind of a final sort of building block in all of these things, I would suggest that the useful measures, not to say don't measure what you already do, but the KPIs that really, really show that you're taking this stuff seriously are things like brand trust, Retention and repeat purchase, there's the loyalty thing. Net promoter score or advocacy, there's the loyalty thing. Complaint rates, there's the improvement areas that you can focus on. Sentiment quality, that's all about building the relationship and actually how you get your customers to feel their way through what you do, not just think their way through. Claim substantiation readiness, in other words, if you're ready to put something out as a campaign, have you got all of the substantiation ready behind it? That becomes a part of every campaign and every project from this point on if you're doing this right. Conversion quality, not just volume. I would much rather have two click-throughs on a post that turned into real business than 2,000 who just liked that post. That is of no value to my business. In fact, actually, it's a big distraction because it can put you off the scent of where the real commercial value is. And longer term brand equity measures as well. You may well have stuff that's meaningful to you as a brand. So factor that in as well. That's really, really key. So the measuring of the evidence that you're putting out and making those claims and then measuring the impact of it, then what actually happened is key to bringing this thing full circle. So, responsible marketing is a kind of key takeaway here. Responsible marketing is not the opposite of commercial marketing. I'm sure you're feeling this right now. You can see there's a real value to sales. There's a real value to, doing the numbers as well here. So, done properly, it's one of the clearest routes to building stronger trust, better loyalty, lower risk, and a more durable performance, which of course we all need. We want to be here tomorrow too, doing great business. So the strongest brands do not just say the right things, they build the proof, they communicate it clearly, and then, really importantly, which is where a lot of people miss, they behave consistently enough for people to actually believe them. So they're walking the walk, they're walking the talk as well. So I'd like you to reflect as we finish this talk now, just really in one area where your marketing could become more responsible and more commercially effective at the same time. Because that little equation, if you can balance it and find examples, but just focus on one and see if you can take it through some of these little checkpoints and filters that we've talked about. If you can do that, that is where you will definitely start to see responsible marketing as a true commercial advantage.